So a lot of us have that one room in the house, the guest room. And technically somebody could stay there, in theory, as long as they don't mind a mess, right? There's a bed, and there's a pillow, and there's a cute little lamp on the nightstand, and even a candle you grabbed at Home Goods because it said warm linen. And you thought, well, that sounds welcoming, right? And for about 3 weeks after you set up a guest room, it's perfect. And then life happens. First, it's a couple boxes that you need to get out of the way. And then it's the Christmas decorations. Then it's the treadmill that you fully intended to use. I'm telling on myself here a little bit. And then there's a dresser drawer full of old tax returns that nobody's brave enough to actually throw out. And so the guest room is available in theory, but if somebody called and asked to stay this weekend, you might be up until midnight trying to clean it up and move boxes around, right? That room is always ready as long as nobody ever shows up. And here's my confession, and I think I'm not alone in this. I have been guilty of treating Jesus exactly like this guest room. I've been genuinely glad he's in the house. But if you actually walked the hallways of my life, you might notice that the room that I have given him is a little full of my plans. And then my backup plans when those first plans don't work out. My need to be in control. My I'll pray about it after it's too late to change anything because I've already decided. My version of faith that basically says, Jesus, you are welcome here as long as you don't try to rearrange anything. And so it forces me to ask myself a question in an honest way. Jesus has a place in my life, but does he have first place? First on Sunday? Sure. First in the parts of life that feel manageable? Probably, most of the time. But first in the decisions that I've already made and the rooms that I've kept off limits? That's a bit of a different question. Because the thing about a guest room is that it doesn't feel like a problem until the guest actually shows up. And most of us, if we're honest, know what that feels like. Most of us would agree that Jesus has a place in our lives, and we'd mean it. We sang about it this morning. We'd put a sign in the front yard if somebody asked us to. But then Monday happens, right? And Monday has opinions. And Monday says the boss gets the first call on our peace. The calendar gets the first call on our time. Our phone gets our first call on our attention, because that's the thing that most of us grab first before we reach for anything else. We've got a dozen things in the room all applying for the same job. Comfort and career and control. The approval of people whose names we won't even remember in 10 years. And every one of them makes the same promise. Put me first, and I'll hold your whole life together. And we're all tired, right? This hamster wheel that we run on is exhausting. We're worn out from handing the keys of our lives over to things that we're really never strong enough to hold them to begin with. This morning we are continuing in our sermon series in the book of Colossians called The Real Thing. And the Apostle Paul wrote this letter to a church and a group of people who were being pulled in a zillion different directions, surrounded by people offering them 100 different things to build a life on. Sound familiar here in 2026? Feels like it's even worse now. And Paul writes this letter to them to say, there's the real thing, and then there's everything else. And the real thing has a name. It's Jesus. And today, Paul is going to help us discover that if Jesus isn't first in everything, then he really isn't first in anything. Because first place isn't something that you sort of have, right? You can't be sort of first. It's kind of like being a little bit pregnant. You either are or you're not. The second that anything else in our life gets a vote or starts earning our attention, Jesus isn't first anymore. He's just one more thing in a crowded room. Last week we talked about how the gospel doesn't just save us, it grows us, in us and through us. But here's the thing, nothing can grow in a room packed to the ceiling with our own stuff. And that's why this year, you've heard me say it over and over again, our focus as a church has been about intentional discipleship, the lifelong process of becoming more like Jesus, and ultimately to let him into every room of our lives and giving him permission to rearrange the furniture. See, discipleship was never just about giving Jesus a single room. Ultimately, it's about handing him the keys to the house. So the question that I encourage us to be sitting with right now is why? Why would I hand Jesus the keys to the whole house instead of just giving him a nice room and calling it generous? Well, the Apostle Paul saw that question coming, and he has an answer for us. So take a look with me this morning in the book of Colossians, chapter 1, starting in verse 15. Paul says, "He, being Christ, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation." So what you've got to know about the church that Paul was writing to in Colossae is that they had been getting a sales pitch. Some teachers had shown up and started offering what they considered to be an upgrade. Jesus plus a little something extra. Jesus plus some secret knowledge. Jesus plus some extra rules. In other words, he's welcome at the table. He's just not quite enough on his own. That's what they're teaching. It's kind of like when you're at the checkout counter at the store and the person asks if you would like to add the extended warranty. Like, no, I don't need a warranty on a $20 toaster. But that's what these guys were trying to do with the gospel. They were like, hey, look, Jesus is great, but have you checked out the premium package? And so Paul drops a bomb on all of that when he says Christ is the image of the invisible God. And that word image that he uses in that verse, it doesn't mean a copy of something. It means the exact representation. Paul's saying, if you've ever wondered what God is actually like, look at Jesus. Here he is. In a face that you can see, in a person that you can experience, in a presence that can give you power. And then he calls Christ the firstborn over all creation. That doesn't mean that Jesus was the first thing God ever created. Jesus has always existed. God the Son, God the Father, and God the Holy Spirit. They've always existed outside of space and time. Don't ask me to explain it to you. It makes my head hurt. But he has always existed. But what that does mean, saying that he's the firstborn over all of creation, means that he is over and above all things. Look at how Paul describes it in verse 16. For everything was created by him in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Everything was created by him. See, Paul's word here, firstborn, it wasn't about birth order, it was about rank. In ancient times, the firstborn was the heir. They were the ones with the authority and the inheritance. And Paul is saying Jesus owns the place. He owns everything. And then comes the line that I just can't get over when I read it. Verse 17, it says, he is before all things, and by him all things hold together. Right now, in this moment, the thing keeping you sitting in your seat is not gravity. It is Jesus. He holds everything together. He holds the atoms in your body and keeps them from flying apart and going different directions. He holds the roof over our heads. He's the one holding everything. He is the reason that there is order and not chaos. See, he's not just a guest in the house. He's the beams in the wall and the foundation in the floor. He's the thing that's keeping the whole place standing and the thing that is holding all of us together. And remember all those things that we're guilty of putting first, the comfort and the career and the control and the approval. Every one of them offer the exact same promise. Just put me first and I'll hold your life together. And every one of them eventually buckles under the weight because none of them was ever built to carry it. But there is one thing that holds us all together, and it's not our calendar. Jesus is meant to have first place in everything. Look at verse 18. He is also the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. When Paul says that Jesus is the head of the church, he's not talking about a building. He's talking about people, us. And then he tells us the whole point of all of it, so that Jesus can have first place in everything. Everything. Not first among equals, not just first on Sundays, not the first place in our lives where everything is already going fine and we feel like it's worked out and we can control it, but first in everything, because if Jesus isn't first in everything, then he's really not first in anything. Paul is naming the goal that God has been driving at this whole time, that in every room of life, Jesus would be first. And just so we don't shrink who we're talking about here, look at verse 19. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him. Not part of God, not a good representative of God, but all of God fully living in Christ. And then here's where all that glory turns into good news. Look at verse 20. And through him to reconcile everything to himself, whether the things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. The one who made everything, the one holding the entire universe together, made peace through his blood. The owner of all of it bled for it. And hold on to that, because Paul's about to make it personal. In verse 21, he says, once you were alienated and hostile in your minds as expressed in your evil actions. Catch the turn there. Paul goes from the size of the universe down to us. He says, once you were alienated. He's talking about all of us. That word means more than distant. That means estranged. We were enemies. In Romans, it says, before coming to know Christ, we are enemies of God. We weren't just messy tenants who left the guest room cluttered. We changed the locks and shut the owner out of his whole house. And here's what God did about it. Verse 22. But now he has reconciled you by his physical body through his death to present you holy, faultless, and blameless before him. The one who could have evicted us because we were enemies of his, who had every right to, didn't. He walked into the house he built, and he died to bring us home. Not to leave us in our mess, but to present us as holy, as faultless and blameless. That's not who we were, that's who his death makes us because of what he did on the cross. And then Paul adds one more line. Don't rush past it. Look at verse 23. He says, if indeed you remain grounded and steadfast in the faith and are not shifted away from the hope of the gospel that you heard. This gospel has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and I, Paul, have become a servant of it. Note the words that Paul uses in this verse: grounded, steadfast, not shifted. See, giving Jesus first place in our lives isn't a one-time decision or some ceremony that we perform. It's not like when you go to a closing after selling your house and you sign the paperwork and you hand over the keys, you never have to think about it again. It's staying surrendered. It's a house that keeps the owner in charge day after day. That's the difference between admiring Jesus and really actually following Jesus. And it's the very thing that we've been calling discipleship all year long. See, a counterfeit Jesus is content with just a little corner of a room, same room your tax returns are in from 1998. But the real Jesus is after the whole house, not because he's needy, but because he made it and he holds it together and then he bled to buy it back. God is not competing for space in our lives. He created the space in our lives. He sustains the space. He purchased the space with his own blood. And he was never going to settle for just a single room because he is the one holding up the whole house. So here's how we make this practical. We begin by not allowing anything else to compete with Christ in our lives. Because remember, he can't be sort of first, right? We've got those rooms that we would gladly open. The Sunday room where we're all dressed up and we're shaking hands and we're smiling and everything's great, right? We've got the parts of life that are going really well. We're good with letting Jesus in there. But for a lot of us, there's another room. And maybe you already know the room in your own life. It looks different for all of us. And maybe your stomach is dropping a little bit now as I'm talking about it. But there is a room that you keep the guest out of. For some of us, maybe it's the bank account. Jesus can have our Sundays, just not our spending. For some, it's the relationship. It's that person that we refuse to forgive, or that person that we're in a relationship with that you know you shouldn't be in. For some of us, it's the calendar. Jesus can have an hour, just not the schedule. Maybe it's that private habit that nobody else knows about, the thing that we do when the door's locked or nobody's home, the drinking that maybe is being hidden, or the things that you're looking at on your phone that you know you shouldn't. And for some of us, it's just the plan, the future that we've already drawn up, the decisions that we've already made in our hearts that we fully intend to pray about after it's too late to make a change. That room, the one with the stuff piled up to the ceiling, the one you'd be up till midnight cleaning out if he ever actually asked to come in, that's the one he's after. See, the lie that keeps that door, there is a lie that keeps that door shut, and we tell ourselves, we believe this lie, that if we hand Jesus ownership of that room, life gets smaller. It gets more restricted and less ours. We treat surrender like it's loss. But think back to what Paul said about who built the house. See, in any house, there are walls that you can move and walls that you can't, right? Some walls are decorative. You knock one out and you open up the room and no harm done. But every house has at least one load-bearing wall, and it's not there to cramp our style. It's the thing holding the whole place together, right? If you try to pull that thing out to get more space, you don't end up with a bigger house. Eventually, you end up with a pile of rubble, and nobody wants that. If you've ever watched HGTV for more than 5 minutes, you know the scene, right? Somebody's really excited. They're going to tear out a wall and make a big open concept kitchen, and they've got their sledgehammer, and everybody's smiling and exciting, and then the contractor walks up, and he puts his hand on the wall, and he gets real quiet, and he goes, yeah, that's load-bearing, right? See, Jesus isn't a decorative wall in our house either. He is the load-bearing wall. He is the one holding the whole thing up. So when he asks for that room, he's not trying to make our life smaller. He's the one keeping the roof from caving in on us. Handing him the room that we've been guarding isn't how our life shrinks. It's actually the only way it stands. Because if he is not first place in everything, then he really isn't first place in anything. And maybe you're sitting here thinking, well, I'm not even sure that Jesus cares about that part of my life. That's just my money or my schedule or my business. Notice the word my there. It's not yours. Friend, he made the details. He's holding the details together as we sit here this morning. There is not one place in our lives that he considers none of his business. So this week, if I can encourage you, church, make one concrete move to hand him the key. And I'm not even saying the whole house at once, just one room at a time. And you're not doing this to earn the house back. He already bought it. You're just called to live like it's his. If it's your money, before you spend $1 this week, give first. Put him first in the budget instead of the last and the leftover. If it's a relationship, make the call that needs to be made. Have the hard conversation. Forgive the person you swore you never would. If it's your calendar, open it and put time with him on it first. Spend the first 15 minutes of your morning reading the Bible. Kathy, I'm going off script for a second. Just stick with me. Here's a little tangent. This is free from Pastor Zakk. One of the things that I was actually talking to somebody about this morning, and it made me think of it. One of the things that I really struggle with it was people say, well, the Bible's hard to read. I don't understand. Listen to me. Listen. If you can go to Starbucks and remember that you have a venti mocha frap with extra cold foam and I don't know. You can learn what propitiation means. Read it. I don't know where I was. Hold on. If it's the plan that you have already made in your life, stop, and before you commit one more inch to that plan, actually bring him into it. What a novel idea. And say, Lord, what step do you want me to take? And then listen if he says, don't take the step you were going to. And here's why this matters for who we're becoming as a church. This right here is discipleship. It's not a one-time handoff where we surrender once and then just kind of coast forever. It is the daily walk through the house, room by room by room, handing him one more key. It's exactly what I mean when I say that we are becoming a church of intentional disciples. Not people who gave Jesus that room once, but people who kept opening doors. Because the guest that you've been keeping out of that room owns it anyway. And he's standing in the hallway right now. And this is amazing when one person does this. And I really, truly want you to go home and do that this week. But then imagine what happens if an entire church does this together. We have people who love to sit and complain and say, well, the world is just getting awful and everything's going to hell in a handbasket and it's all falling apart. And why isn't Jesus doing anything? He made us to do it. If we make this a daily part of our living, making Jesus first place in everything, think about what happens in marriages and families and workplaces in this community. Think about the people who see us, who know that we're different because we're full of the joy of Christ. That's a house full of people who handed the owner the keys. And that's what we've been after all year long, talking about discipleship. Not more information, not busier Christians, but disciples, ordinary people who keep walking the house with Jesus day after day and week after week until there's not a single place left in the house that he's not in. Last week, we said the gospel doesn't just save us, it grows us. And this is how it grows, one room at a time. One changed life that spills over into marriage and workplace and this city. That is the real thing, and it's available to every person in this room. Some of you in here love Jesus. He is genuinely in the house, but you still have that room that you need to open up. And friend, today is the day. You don't have to go in there and dust stuff off. You don't have to hide the boxes in a closet somewhere. He already knows what's in there, all right? And he's not embarrassed or ashamed or worried or nervous. You just have to hand it over. Because the door isn't locked from his side. It's locked from ours. And for others, maybe if you're honest, Jesus doesn't have a room in the house at all. Maybe this is your first time in a place like this, and this feels like a lot. But here's the thing, if that's you, the God who made you, the one holding your life together this very second, looked at the house that you changed the locks on and shut him out, and instead of walking away, he walked to a cross. He died to pay for every door that you shut. And he rose from the grave so that you could finally open it from the inside. And coming to know him in a saving relationship, you don't have to have things figured out. You just have to say, Jesus, I'm opening the door, and I need you to come in. And it is the simplest prayer that you can ever pray. Jesus was never meant to just be one room in our life. He is holding the whole thing up. So don't just give him a place. Give him first place. Because if Jesus is not first in everything, he really isn't first in anything.